The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet train station. Clara clutched her ticket in one hand and her suitcase in the other. The station, usually bustling, felt empty despite the handful of travelers milling about. Today, the world seemed to shrink around her and one person, James. They stood a few feet apart, both struggling to find words that wouldn't choke them. The silence between them was thick with unspoken emotions, memories, and the weight of an imminent goodbye. Clara's fingers trembled as she glanced at the clock. The train would arrive in 10 minutes. "So, this is it," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. James nodded, his jaw tightening. He had always been the composed one, the rock Clara leaned on during storms. But today, even he couldn't keep the tears from glistening in his eyes. "It doesn't have to be," he said, though his voice betrayed the hopelessness in his heart. Clara turned to him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You know it does. My dreams, they're out there, James. I can't let this opportunity slip away." James nodded again, his head heavy with understanding. She had spent years dreaming of becoming a journalist, and the offer from a prestigious magazine in Paris was everything she had ever worked for. But knowing didn't make it easier. He started but stopped himself. He wanted to say that he loved her, that he'd wait, that they could make this work. But deep down, he knew long distance wasn't what Clara needed. She needed freedom to soar, not a tether to hold her back. The train's horn echoed in the distance, a sharp reminder that time was running out. Clara stepped closer to James, her heart pounding. "I'll miss you," she said, her voice breaking. James reached out, hesitating for just a moment before pulling her into a tight embrace. It was the kind of hug that speaks louder than words, filled with every emotion they couldn't articulate. His arms wrapped around her as if letting go would tear him apart. Clara buried her face in his chest, inhaling his familiar scent, memorizing the feeling of safety he always gave her. She didn't want to let go, but the train's whistle called her to a future she couldn't ignore. Finally, she pulled back, her eyes searching his face, etching every detail into her memory. "Thank you for everything, James. For loving me enough to let me go." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Always." The train pulled into the station, its doors sliding open. Clara turned and walked toward it, each step heavier than the last. She boarded, found her seat, and glanced out the window. James stood on the platform, hands in his pockets, watching her with a small, bittersweet smile. As the train began to move, Clara pressed her hand to the window. James mirrored the gesture, their final connection before distance claimed them. And as the station faded into the distance, Clara felt the warmth of his embrace linger, a reminder of their last hug before goodbye.